So also in Saskatchewan, nodular cherts are a lithic material we do have. They are not a predominant lithic material, but they are a material that shows up. And these form as nodules within limestone. And unless they're broken open, they just look like a chunk of limestone. And so these have they have their own challenges to working with them. And so I thought I would demonstrate how to biface one, but on a larger scale, using a large piece of nodular chert from Texas, just so that it's easier to see what's going on. And so you can see from the exterior, it basically just looks like a chunk of limestone. To start bifacing on a piece like this, you have to first get through the cortex. That is the first challenge. That's the main challenge. Throughout it, all the way through, it will be about removing this chalky, limey cortex. And you see if I scrape it, off comes this very chalky textured material. This is remnants of the cortex, pieces of the sort of substrate material that formed it. So to start with, I'm going to kind of apply that centerline rule where I'm going to try to attack it. But because it is quite high up on the center line, I'm going to tilt the piece away so that the force isn't being directed into the material like this. It will just take a little nip off the tip, hopefully. Oh. Okay. Well, took the nip off the tip I was hoping for, but there was fractures that ran in along the surface from the top that came down, and those acted as sort of a starter for another fracture running from here. Okay. I was expecting this not to have that, though I should have anticipated that. Okay. I can keep working with this. We still have a nodular piece. Okie dokie. So to start with, centerline rules still apply. There are some fractures running in from just under the cortex. So I do have to be careful of that. So I'm going to start by kind of applying what's a stitch subroutine. Go. So the reason it's called a stitch subroutine is because I first sort of struck from this way and struck from this way, but then I'm going to turn it over, and in the valleys that creates the scars of those flakes. It sets up better angles to continue running next series. The flakes this produces, this sort of percussion, if using antler, tend to be quite flat. They don't tend to curl as much as with hammerstone or copper. So the object at this stage is to try to remove the cortex as much as possible. The cortex is quite soft, and it sort of absorbs and cushions the blow of an impact, and so it's the main obstacle in working the piece right now. So I have to try to work around from working on exposed areas to try to get underneath the cortex and remove it. I have to get it from the back side. So the reason, again, it's sort of called a stitch, I'm not doing a very tidy explanation of it, but the idea of kind of keep turning the piece back and forth. So I'm constantly trying to work it from opposing angles back and forth. This sort of flaking is also very similar to what is called a sort of centripetal core. Working the piece around is what that kind of means, centripetal. And it was one of the original sort of flaking techniques, going all the way back to Neanderthal in some ways, because it produces these sort of reliable, thick, sturdy flakes that are sharp all the way around the margin, that are useful for tools. So as I'm going around and more of the cortex is being removed, I am trying to leave ideal spots for the next series of flakes to come along to thin out the piece. But I do have some ideal platforms or some good platform areas already prepared and set up, but I'm leaving those for the next stage. Or trying to anyway. It is sort of a little bit irregular the way the cortex slowly grades into chert. You can see that there are some spots in the cortex that are a little bit more silicified and then back into chalkier areas. This is just a little bit of a complicating factor in developing platforms so close to the cortex. So again, that was a sort of hard restart there where I just angled the piece away and took off a stout short flake just to give me a cleaner area because I had battered all that area along there and I needed a cleaner surface to continue to work. So short, stout flakes like that are not very effective in thinning the overall piece, but if I needed to have a hard restart, because I had kind of ruined the edge along here, that's a useful technique. Often it's that last spot of cortex which proves to be the trickiest spot. So now it is a fairly rough biface, but most of the cortex has been dealt with, so I'm going to start to drive longer thinning flakes from a few of these platform areas I left around the edge. To try to tackle a few of the platform areas I left around the edge to thin and shape the piece a bit better. Okay. Okay, so that face is flattened out a fair bit. I'm going to try to crawl the edge up to tackle some of this. Turtle backed now, and with turtle backing, there's always it's really easy to try to tackle this mass while you're still too close to this face, and so in effect you are above center line on it, and so what needs to happen is I need to pick an area where I will crawl the edge up much closer to it and establish a good firm platform and get underneath it. So it does involve sacrificing a bit of width. Sometimes you can bend a flake around it just with careful pressure, but it is always tricky. It's easy to get a step fracture instead of your intended bending flake. So I've created a fairly stout bevel there that should allow me to get underneath some of this. Go. So from there on, that when I didn't tackle the mass head on first, I tried to tackle it from the side to remove as much as possible, and then in what's remaining I should have a good ridge just to run across there. It dove a little bit funny there. I sort of had a glancing blow that directed the force a little bit too much this way, but that's okay. It's no major obstacle. This sort of delta valley here, the delta in between, is not a major obstacle to clean off. I have a step fracture here from an earlier incomplete removal that I have to be careful of, that I don't drive any more in this direction. I just worked this face quite a bit, and so I'm about to switch over to tackle this face a bit, but I just have to be careful of that incomplete fracture, step fracture. still a few platforms that could be taken to further refine the piece, but this is suitable to be finished into just about any different type of point you could fit within it. Most of the hard work is done. Most of the thinning, it would just be a matter of shaping it into a finished piece.